Okay, so today we are going to be talking about absolute value equations. Yay! Absolute value equations. Again, when we talk about absolute value, we're talking about the distance from zero, right? So if we're like on a number line, there's 0. If we go over to 2, we are a difference of 2 spaces, right? So that's a distance of 2. But if we go over to -2, that is also a distance of 2 spaces. So if I am given like the absolute value something is equal to 2, there are 2 possible answers for that, right? It could be -2 or it could be 2. So when we talk about absolute value, we get into some situations where we can have several different kinds of answers. One thing, well, I guess we'll talk about that in a second. But the first thing we need to talk about, again, absolute value is represented with just 2 straight lines. So anything inside of there is what it's talking about is the absolute value of. Those are the symbols for absolute value. So the first step when we're solving an absolute value equation is we need to get those 2 vertical lines all by themselves. So we isolate the absolute value. If there's anything outside the absolute value, outside those 2 vertical lines on the same side of the equation, we need to get rid of it, get it to the other side of the equation. Okay, that's the first step. And you're not going to actually see that today on your worksheet, but I'm just giving you the step here so that you can have it for future reference. Okay? Then once the absolute value is by itself, we run into a couple of different situations. Well, 3 to be exact. So 3 different situations. Depending on what it's equal to, it'll change the number of solutions that you can have. So typically when it's equal to, like when we talk about distance, distance is always expressed positively, right? If I go to St. George, that's like 300 miles away, right? And then come back, I didn't travel 0 miles, right? I traveled 300 miles there, and I traveled 300 miles back, for a total of 600 miles. Anytime you talk about distance, we talk about it positively. You can't go negative distance. So since absolute value is representing the distance from 0, that means if your absolute value is all by itself and it's equal to a negative number, then you are just basically done because it's not possible, right? Absolute value cannot equal a negative number. You cannot be a negative distance from 0. So if you are equal to a negative number, it's just a no solution. Okay? So if you equal a positive number, which is what you will get most of the time, remember, if you were to, there were 2 possible answers for that, right? So if it is ever all by itself and equal to a positive number, what ends up happening is everything inside that absolute value has 2 possible things that it could equal, because both would have an absolute value of a positive 2. So to solve something with a positive number, you end up dropping those absolute value signs and you split it into 2 different equations. Because inside that absolute value, x plus 2 could equal a positive 2, or x plus 2 could equal a negative 2. You don't know which one, so you solve for both, right? So you could either get 0 or you could get negative 4 as your answers in that situation here. But again, the step is, once you have the absolute value all by itself, you drop the absolute value and split it into 2 different equations to a positive and negative possibility. So basically this number on the other side of the equal sign could either be positive or it could be negative. So you split it into both of those possibilities and solve. And you would get 2 different answers, right? X could equal 0 or x could equal negative 4 would be your 2 possible answers for that one. Now there is a third possibility. Third possibility is if it is equal to 0. 0 is 0 spaces away from 0, right? There is only one possible answer for absolute value if you're at 0. The absolute value is 0 and there's no positive or negative 0, right? So if you actually have the absolute value all by itself and it's equal to 0, you just drop the absolute value and solve because there's only one possible answer there. So x plus 2 has to equal 0, so it would just be x equals -2, and you would get a 1 solution. Okay? So as we're solving, we get the absolute value by itself, and then we check. If it's positive, we split it into 2 equations. If it's 0, we just solve the one equation that's there. And if it's negative, we're done. There's no solution, right? So let's look at some examples of what I'm talking about. Okay. And we're going to keep this right here to refer to. That's our check when we're done. So again, all these absolute values are already going to be isolated here. There's nothing outside the absolute values on any of these problems on this worksheet. So we don't have to worry about that first step that I talked about. We're just doing the check. Okay. So on number 2 here, for example, absolute value of n is equal to 8. 8 is a positive number. So I dropped the absolute values and split it to the positive and negative possibilities. N could either be a positive 8 or n could be a negative 8. I don't know which one it is, so both are my answers. Both have an absolute value of 8. So I write down both answers, right? 8 is 8 spots away from 0. Negative 8 is 8 spots away from 0. Okay, not too tough, right? Now, absolute value of x, it's all by itself, is equal to negative 8. So over here, it's equal to a negative number. That's not possible, right? You can't be negative spots away from 0. So this is a no solution. It is not possible. Okay? Absolute value of x equals 1. It's all by itself, right? So we split it. X could either equal 1 or x could equal -1. Just like number 2. This one, we have the absolute value all by itself, and it's equal to -4. That is not possible, right? If it's negative, that's a no solution. Okay, so no solution. Okay. Then, absolute value of n minus 2 equals 10. It is all by itself, and it's equal to a positive number. So I'm going to split it to a positive negative possibility. So everything inside the absolute value, n minus 2, could either equal a 10, positive 10, or it could equal a negative 10. And notice as I rewrite it, I do not include the absolute values because I'm done with them. These are the 2 possible things that could be inside the absolute value. N minus 2 equals positive 10, or n minus 2 equals negative 10. And then I just solve for both. My ultimate goal is to solve for the variable, right? Not find the absolute value, but just figure out what n is, or what it could be. So I would add 2. And it's the same step on both of these, right? Add 2. But I get 2 different answers. N could equal 12, or n could equal -8. Okay? So many times I see students solve for n equals 12, because that's what it's the positive one right here, right? And then they just write n equals -12. They just write the negative version of the final answer. Don't do that. That is wrong. Okay? Please, please, please actually split the equation, because you do get different answers, right? There are different answers there. And I'll zoom in a little bit better on the other side here. I can see we're kind of zoomed out. Okay. So, this time we have absolute value of -6m equals 0. Well, if equal to 0, then 0 is already just one, like it's at 0, right? So there's only one possible answer there. So negative, and I just dropped the absolute value and just solve for the one answer. -6m equals 0. You have to divide by -6, right? And m is equal to 0. Would be your answer. Not too tough. Okay, I'm a little unfocused now. Okay. This one, v over 3 is equal to 2. It's positive, so we're going to split it to the positive and negative possibility. So v over 3 could equal +2, or v over 3 could equal -2. And then you would just times by 3, right? Times by 3, and you get v is equal to 6, or v is equal to -6. Now sometimes it's the same number, positive, negative, but not all the time, especially when we get further into this. So don't do that false assumption there. You'll get half of everything wrong on the test. Absolute value of -7 minus 4 is equal to +7. So that's a positive number, so I split it. Doesn't matter if these are negative inside. It doesn't matter what's inside, just matters what it's equal to. It's equal to a positive, a negative, or a 0. So I'm going to split it. -7 minus 4p is either equal to +7 or it's equal to -7. So it's a two-step equation there, right? You get rid of what's adding and subtracting first. So you'd add 7 to each side, which gives me -4p is equal to 14, or -4p is equal to 0. And you'll find you get decimals quite often on inequalities, or not inequalities, absolute values, just because keeping both sides or both equations at a nice number is not something we typically do. It's possible, but it limits what equations we can put on there. So we divide by -4 last, right? And that one's going to be a decimal, and that one's going to be 0. So 14 divided by -4 is -3.5. So p could equal -3.5, or p could equal 0. And that would be your two answers. Yeah, not too tough, right? This one is equal to 0. So again, 0 is the one solution. You just drop the absolute value signs and solve the equation. So -3 plus 2n equals 0. So you'd add 3, and this one's going to be decimal 2. 2n equals 3. Divide by 2, and that's going to be 1.5, or 3/2. And that's your one answer. Okay, not too tough, right? Let's do another one. This one is equal to a positive number, so two equations. So 2 plus 2b equals +10, or 2 plus 2b equals -10. And then you just solve those, right? Again, two steps. So you'd get rid of the number adding and subtracting first. So you'd -2. That gives you 2b is equal to 8, and 2b is equal to -12. And then you would divide by 2. And you get b is equal to 4, or b is equal to -6. You get two different answers there, right? That's why you split it. Don't be lazy and not split it. Last one is equal to a negative number. And again, if it's equal to negative, that's not possible, so no solution. Don't even have to do anything. Just write no solution. And that is it. Okay, if you have any questions or concerns, let us know. We want to help. You just got to let us know. And I'll see you guys out there.